What's going on, folks? Welcome back to the channel. So today we are at my friend Jess's house. She's the one that we did the nightstands for, and so today we are going to be working on the backsplash. So as you can see, she just bought the house, she just moved in, she's still unpacking, but today we are going to be working on this backsplash. So what we're going to be using are these Subway kind of style tiles. They're a little bit on the rough cut edge, but they are rectangular, and we are going to be working from the countertop all the way up to these upper cabinets. We're going to go all the way across, we're going to wrap around a little bit all the way on both sides, and then we're also going to go right up to the bottom of that vent hood. So today, one of the things that we're going to be using, which is different than what I normally use, is we're going to be using the pre-mixed mastic as the adhesive as opposed to a thin set. Okay, so I want to jump on here real quick and explain to you guys what I mean by when I say mastic. When I say mastic, all I'm talking about is a pre-mixed thin set mortar that we're using as the adhesive for the tile. The reason why I keep saying mastic is because back in the day when I first started doing tile, I used a product that was called mastic. So my brain just reverts back to that because that's where I started and that's what I remember. But all I'm talking about is a pre-mixed thin set mortar. And the reason why we use that, and I'll talk about it in the video a little bit, but the reason why we use it is because since these are smaller tiles, we don't have to worry about how everything dries. If we were using a bigger tile, we don't want to use the premix stuff because the premix stuff actually is a air dry, and the powdered stuff, or the stuff that comes in a bag that you mix with water, is a chemical dry. So you can use that on a bigger tile, so it's going to dry. But if you use the premix stuff on bigger tiles, then it requires air and it probably won't dry. So that's the reason why I'm using this premix stuff for this particular project. But if we were doing something that was on a bigger tile or whatever, we would use the stuff that's in a bag. Also, the stuff that's in a bag is a lot cheaper. The stuff that's premixed is obviously more expensive, but because this is a much smaller job, we were able to use the simple set that we just got at Home Depot, and it was pre-made for us. So hopefully that explains some of the confusion. We'll talk a little bit about this in the video, but I want to make sure you understood what I meant when I said mastic. All I'm talking about is the thin set mortar that we're using for this particular project. Hopefully that fixes everything. Let's get back to the video. The reason why we can do that with this particular tile is because these tiles are less than a foot. If they were bigger than a foot, we'd want to use the thin set, and the reason why is because thin set is a chemical dry where the mastic requires air in order to dry. So the fact that these are smaller, they will be able to dry out, and if we needed to do a bigger tile, we would have to use thin set, and the reason why is because of the fact that it is a chemical dry, and that way it doesn't matter how big the tile is. If we don't, if they're really big, then they never dry and you end up cracking the tile over time. But for the purposes of a backsplash, especially since there's not going to be any foot traffic, we are going to have to seal everything just because it's a cooking area. But other than that, we'll be able to use the mastic, and we'll be able to put everything together pretty quickly. So stick around, we're going to get started. All right, so the place that we're going to start for this particular tile is we're going to start right in the middle of the vent hood. And the reason why we're going to do that is because she does not want a brick pattern. She wants everything straight stacked. So the best place to start is right there because that's going to be the focal point of the entire kitchen. So we're going to stack everything right off the middle, and then we will work our way to either side. Now, the way that I typically like to do things is I like to do all the whole tiles first, and then I'll go back and I will cut everything down. Now, I've got a wet saw. That wet saw works great, but it's better just to get everything laid out because if you start cutting, then you get distracted and then you kind of lose sight of the big picture. So we want to make sure we keep our eyes on the big picture, get all the big tiles down first, and then we will go back and cut everything out. So this particular project won't take us very long simply because it's going to save my knees because I don't have to be on the ground for once, and we'll be able to just do everything right off the wall. And again, it's not like a structural thing because we're not going to have to walk on it. But like I said, we will have to seal this simply because of the fact that, number one, you want to do that with the grout, but also because of the fact that it is a cooking surface, we're going to want to have all that sealed up. So with that, let's go. So the first thing we want to do is we want to start measuring where the center is beneath this vent hood. The reason why we picked the vent hood is because that's going to be a major focal point within this kitchen. The vent hood is also going to be the highest point of where the tile is going to be, so we want to make sure that we have the center point there. Now the first few tiles that we put in place were probably the toughest ones to get in because this is going to kind of set the pace and the location of where everything else goes. One of the things that I started to make a mistake on was putting this stuff on too thin. I'm really used to using the stuff that comes in a bag, the thin set that comes in a bag, and so I've got my own consistency that I'm used to when I do tile. But this is a little bit thicker because it is a premix, but it works great, and I love this stuff, but it is expensive and it does go on a little bit thicker. So use a little bit more of my forearms, but it was a good workout and we got it all in. So once we got moving, everything started to go pretty smoothly. We were able to get a lot of the tile in. I'm not going to show you guys every single one of these tiles going in, but you get the idea. It's just a matter of making sure that we have spacers on the bottom where the countertop is and on all sides of the tile. We spent the first day doing all of the full pieces, and we went all the way up to the top of this vent hood before we moved to either side of the tile. The full pieces pretty much took a full day, and then we came back on the second day to do all the cuts. Overall, it went pretty well. Jess's boyfriend Derek helped me quite a bit on the first day since she was a little bit busy, and then she came back on the second day and helped me with all of these cuts. So it was a lot of measuring, and I thought it was going to be a lot less cuts, but it was a lot more than I thought. There were cuts underneath every single cabinet and every single one of the windows and the outlets. Now this tile saw I have had for a very long time. I've had it for probably 20 years. I think it's close to 20 years. And it has been a workhorse. I've used it off and on for different projects for a very long time. There are some limitations, and newer ones are probably a little bit better, but as long as this motor keeps going, I'm going to keep using it. And one thing to keep in mind is this is a wet saw. The water helps with some of the dust, and it also makes the cuts a lot smoother. One of the things that I did here was I used some of my woodworking skills when I cut out some of these smaller cuts for where the outlets were. Basically just made some smaller cuts, and then I was able to break them off from there. And then I used the blade to smooth things out as best I can. Most of these cuts are going to be hidden behind the wall plugs, so I'm not too terribly worried about it being perfect, but I did want to make it where it was easy to get to and that it was within the boundary of those wall plugs, or wall plug covers I should say. Again, these cuts were quite a bit of time, but once you get moving, especially with two people, it makes things a lot easier. And we got it all done in the second day. All right, well, it took us 2 days, but we finished. I am finishing up, cleaning up, but I want to show you guys what it all looks like. Had a lot of cuts, a lot more cuts than we thought there would be, simply because of all the electrical outlets right there, the windows, and under the counter right there, we had just a bunch of cuts there, but and of course the vent. But I think it looks really good. So we'll come back tomorrow and we will do the grouting. But pretty good job. This took a lot longer than we thought it would, but that's okay. Everything always does, right? It always does. All right, folks. Well, we'll see you. We'll see you tomorrow when we do some grouting. So now the third day is when things really got fun. We got to do all the grout. Now, this was not a long process. It didn't take us all day to do, but it is a process that takes a lot of work. So the first thing to do is get everything mixed, and the consistency that I like for my grout is for it to be about what a creamy peanut butter is a typical good rule of thumb. You'll sit there and play around with it, and in this case, especially on the first batch, I did a little bit more water than I needed to, so I came back with some more powder and then finally got the consistency that I wanted, and we were able to move on. This drill, I've had it for about 20 years, and the reason why I keep the drill is pretty much for these types of things, because it is plugged in, it's got lots of torque. If I tried to do a mix with a cordless drill, it wouldn't work as well. So now that we're putting all of this grout in, the thing to keep in mind is we have a float, and we want to come in at an angle. You don't want to come in straight or up and down, because you'll end up pulling some of that grout out of each one of the grooves. And so what you want to do is come in at an angle, and then you put it all in, and then you scrape off as much as you can, and then you'll wipe it down. Having a second person for this makes things a lot easier, because while I was putting in all the grout, Jess was coming in with the first set of sponges and wiping everything off. The wipe down process is extensive. We probably used 5 or 6 buckets full of water, and then in the end, you just let this little haze get on there, and then you just wipe it off with a clean towel, and you're all set. All right, we finished. It looks pretty good. Jess, the owner, what do you think?
It looks amazing.
So yeah, it looks really good. We just have a little bit more wiping down. Came out really nice. And then being able to do all of the trim work on there keeps it nice and clean. But we just have to wipe it down a lot because there's still a little bit of a haze. And that's the problem with this, is you have to do multiple wipe downs. But like even underneath, it looks great. I'm not a huge fan of the vertical stacking like this. I like to brick it because it makes it a little bit more forgiving. But in this particular application and the size of the tiles, it looks perfect. So with that, hope you guys enjoyed this video. And if you did, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe if I've earned your subscription. And if you want to be notified of future videos, don't forget to hit that bell. We'll see you on the next one. See ya.